Humans quietly departed, while the Galactic Council realized the cost of their terrible mistake. The gavel came down before I finished my sentence. I was mid-word. My mouth was still open. The sound of that gavel, hard and sharp against the crystal podium, cut through my voice like a blade through paper. And then came the sound I will never forget for the rest of my life. Applause. Not the polite kind, not the kind you give a speaker at the end of a long meeting. This was the kind that carries joy in it. Relief. 700 alien delegates, representing 41 civilizations across the known galaxy, were clapping because humanity had just been thrown out. My name is Yael Osei Mensah. I have been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 11 years. I have sat in that chamber through trade wars and border disputes, and 3 separate incidents where 2 member species nearly came to open conflict. I have shaken hands, claws, tentacles, and things that had no name in any human language. I have given speeches that lasted 6 hours. I have signed documents that took 18 months to negotiate. I have drunk ceremonial liquids that tasted like rust, and been polite about it every single time. And on the day they voted to expel humanity from the coalition, I sat in my chair, and I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not slam my own fists on the table, or demand a recount, or accuse them of corruption, even though I could have made a very convincing case for all 3. I picked up my pen, clicked it once. The sound was tiny in that enormous room, but the delegate sitting nearest to me, a tall, gray-skinned being from the Mavic collective named Sorvan, flinched at it. I noticed that. I filed it away. Then I looked up at the chamber one last time. 700 faces, or things that worked like faces, some with eyes that glowed, some with no eyes at all, some with expressions I could read after 11 years of practice, and some that remained as unreadable as stone. Zarek of the Sovereign Brood was in the front row. Their 4 upper limbs folded in a posture I had learned long ago meant deep satisfaction. They had wanted this for years. They had built the coalition for this vote, quietly, carefully, pulling in favors, and making promises, and framing humanity as a problem that needed a solution. And they had won. The charge, read aloud by the council secretary in its flat, translated voice, was destabilizing cultural influence. That was the official language. What it meant, stripped of all the diplomatic cushioning, was this: humans are too strange, too unpredictable, too creative, too willing to question things that other civilizations have accepted for centuries, too fast-moving, too loud, in ways that make older, more settled species nervous, too comfortable with chaos, too human. They had studied us for 60 years since first contact, and after 60 years, their conclusion was that we were too much. I stood up. The applause faded. Some part of me appreciated that. Whatever they thought of us, 700 delegates still had enough courtesy to go quiet when the condemned stood up to speak. Very well, I said. My voice was steady. I had made it steady on purpose. We will begin the withdrawal immediately. Zarek's mandibles clicked. That was their version of a smile. I left the building without looking back. My aide, a young man named Owen Calloway, fell into step beside me in the corridor outside. Owen was 29 years old, sharp as a needle, and very good at reading my silences. He said nothing until we reached the lift, and then he said, "How long do you think it will take them to notice?" "The Keth Relay Network," I said. 3 months, maybe 4 if they get lucky, with the weather patterns in the Cygnus arm. "And the trade algorithms?" 6 weeks, I said, maybe less. Dr. Chandrasekharan's models run on a feedback loop. Without her maintenance updates, the drift will start small, and then accelerate. Owen was quiet for a moment. The lift hummed around us. Should we warn them? I thought about Zarek's 4 folded arms. I thought about the applause. I thought about 11 years of sitting at that table and being called, in various diplomatic phrasings, a problem. "I am going to file the withdrawal paperwork tonight," I said. "Every form, every handover document, every notification required under Section 14 of the Coalition Charter. We are going to do this exactly right, exactly by the book. We are going to be so correct, and so professional, and so cooperative in this withdrawal that not one single being in that chamber can ever say we left in bad faith." Owen nodded slowly. "And the warning?" It will be in the paperwork, I said. All of it. Every system. Every contract. Every piece of infrastructure we have been maintaining. It will all be documented. Section by section. Page by page. I looked at him. If they choose not to read it, that is their decision. The lift opened. I walked out into the corridor that led to the human diplomatic wing. The walls here were lined with photographs. Earth photographs. Oceans and mountains and cities and faces. They had always seemed small and far away when I walked past them during busy days. Tonight they seemed very close. Owen followed me into the office and sat down without being asked. He pulled out his tablet and started a new document. At the top, in plain text, he typed, "Withdrawal Commission, Day 1. "Where do we start?" he asked. "At the beginning," I said. "Pull every human contract, every service agreement, every maintenance schedule, every protocol, every system we operate, or cooperate, or have contributed to, in the last 60 years. Everything. I want a complete map of our footprint in this coalition." "That is going to be a very large map," Owen said quietly. "I know," I said. He started typing. I made coffee. Old Earth blend, dark roast, the kind that smelled like early mornings and long nights and getting through things. I poured 2 cups and set one on his desk and stood at the window looking out at the lights of the council city spreading below us. Millions of lights from dozens of species all living in the same place, which had always seemed remarkable to me, the fact that it worked at all. The vote had been 687 to 13. 13 delegates had voted against expulsion. Sorvan of the Mavic Collective had been one of them. I knew this because Owen had been quietly counting in real time and had sent me a small message to my earpiece as the results were read. 13 out of 700. Better than 0. Not much else to say about it. I thought about all the things those 687 delegates did not know they were applauding for. I thought about the relay stations and the medical databases, and the trade frameworks, and the early warning systems, and the graduate student at MIT, whose dissertation software was currently the only thing monitoring a narrow corridor between 2 arms of the galaxy, for the kind of large-scale spatial anomalies that, if left undetected, could threaten shipping lanes that 41 civilizations depended on. That graduate student was named Dr. Priya Chandrasekaran. She had written her dissertation in 2241. She was now 73 years old and living on Luna Base, happily retired, growing small plants in her apartment and occasionally consulting for private firms when the money seemed interesting. Nobody in that chamber knew her name. Nobody in that chamber knew her work was still running. Nobody in that chamber had ever opened the maintenance logs for the Vork Passage early warning system, because it had simply always worked, and things that simply always work tend to stop being examined. I sipped my coffee. Outside, the city lights blurred a little in the mist. Owen looked up from his tablet. "Yael," he said, "this map is going to be very, very large." "I know," I said again. "I mean large as in, when they read it. I think some of them are going to feel rather foolish." "They might," I said. "Are you sure we should not send a summary? Something shorter? Something easier to—" "Owen," I said gently, "write it all down. Every single thing, clearly, accurately, completely. We are going to hand them a document so thorough that no one will ever be able to say we hid anything. If they feel foolish when they read it, that is because reading the truth sometimes feels that way." He nodded and went back to typing. I went back to looking at the lights. My comm unit buzzed on the desk. A message from my counterpart in the Human Diplomatic Corps on the other side of the city. A woman named Constance Irvine who handled military and security affairs. It said only, "I heard. I am starting the Defense Protocol Review tonight. How do you want to handle the weapons treaty notifications?" I typed back. "Same as everything else. Full compliance, full documentation, full transparency. Every step by the book." She replied after a moment. "Understood. This is going to take months." I typed, "I know, do it right." There was a longer pause this time. Then, "They have no idea what they just did, do they?" I set the comm unit face down on the desk and picked up my coffee again. No, they did not. They had seen a species they found uncomfortable, and they had used their majority to make that species someone else's problem. They had not asked what that species had been doing quietly in the background for 60 years. They had not asked, because it had not occurred to them that the answer could possibly matter. That was, I thought, a very natural mistake to make. Humans had made similar mistakes in our own history. Many times. We had looked at things that seemed unimportant and dismissed them. We had removed things that seemed unnecessary and discovered too late that they had been load-bearing. But we had also learned, eventually, to ask better questions, to look at the quiet things, to wonder what was holding up the ceiling before we knocked out a wall. The delegates in that chamber were about to learn the same lesson. It was going to be an uncomfortable education, and I was, despite everything, a little sorry about that. Not very sorry, but a little. Owen worked through the night. I worked beside him. Somewhere around the third hour, he went very quiet, and I looked over at his screen, and the document he was building was already 90 pages long, and had not yet covered the first decade of human involvement in the coalition infrastructure. He turned and looked at me. His expression was not triumphant. It was not angry. It was something quieter and more complicated than either of those things. "Yael," he said, "do you think they will be all right? After we leave? Do you think the systems will hold?" I considered the question seriously. He deserved a serious answer. "Most of them will hold for a while," I said. "The major systems have redundancies. The smaller ones will start showing stress first. If they move quickly, if they read the documentation carefully and assign capable people to each handover item, they could manage the transition without too much disruption. And if they do not move quickly?" I set down my coffee cup. "Then they will learn why it matters to move quickly." He turned back to his screen. I watched him type for a moment, long, careful sentences, each one accurate and clear, and completely free of any sentiment whatsoever. We were not angry. That was the thing I kept coming back to, as the night went on, and the document grew, and the city lights outside shifted, as the local star began to think about rising. We were not angry, and we were not bitter, and we were not plotting. We were just leaving, carefully, properly, completely, just as we had arrived, with paperwork filed correctly, and every obligation met. The difference between arriving and leaving was simply that when we arrived, nobody had paid much attention to what we were building, and when we left, they were going to have to live inside what we had built, without us, for the first time. That distinction, I thought, was going to matter enormously. Owen saved the document at the 97th page. We had reached the year 2267. There were 53 more years of coalition membership to document. "Go get some sleep," I told him. "We have a long day tomorrow." He gathered his things slowly, like a man who had just realized he was carrying more weight than he expected. At the door, he paused. "Yael, how long do you think it will take before they ask us back?" I thought about it. Truly thought about it. Ran the numbers in my head the way I had been running numbers for 30 years of diplomatic service. "The first real crisis," I said. "Not the small ones. The first real one. The kind where something breaks that cannot be fixed with what they have." "How long until that happens?" "The Vork passage," I said. "The monitoring system. 18 months, maybe 2 years. Depends on the cycle patterns." Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "And what will we do when they ask?" I looked at him. He was young, and tired, and carrying a question that had no easy answer. "We will answer," I said simply, "because that is what we do." He left. I turned back to the window. The city was waking up outside, lights shifting from night blue to morning gold, the kind of light that looked the same on 100 worlds and always felt like a small promise that the night had not been the last one. I sat down at my desk and opened a new document. At the top I typed 3 words, "Withdrawal Commission Report." Then, below that, in plain, simple language, I began to write the story of 60 years of human presence in a galaxy that had just decided it could do without us. It was going to be a very long document, and every word of it was going to be true. That, in the end, was the only weapon we needed. The first thing to go was something almost no one noticed. Somewhere in the middle of the 3rd month after the expulsion vote, on a cold Tuesday by Earth reckoning, a series of relay nodes in the Keth Meridian region began dropping communication packets. Not many at first, a fraction of a percent, the kind of noise that a good network engineer dismisses as background interference and marks down in a log and forgets about by lunchtime. But the packets kept dropping. and the fraction kept growing. I know this because Sorvan of the Mavic Collective, one of the 13 who had voted against the expulsion, was still in the habit of sending me messages through an encrypted personal channel we had set up years earlier, back when we had been junior staffers trying to navigate council politics, and had discovered over a shared meal that we both thought the senior delegates were sometimes spectacularly wrong about things. Sorvan's message was short. It has started. The network team is blaming solar flux. No one has checked the maintenance schedule yet. I was sitting in my office on Luna Base. The Withdrawal Commission had moved its headquarters there 6 weeks after the vote, as the last of the human diplomatic staff had quietly and professionally vacated the council facilities and handed back their access badges and said polite goodbyes to colleagues of many species who had given them stiff, uncomfortable farewells in return. I wrote back, "When they check the maintenance schedule, they will find the handover documentation we left. Section 7, subsections C through F. All the relay contract information is there." Sorvan replied after a few minutes, "How long do you think it will take them to find Section 7? That was a fair question. The handover documentation was thorough. It was also, by necessity of being thorough, very long. 412 pages long, to be exact. Section 7 began on page 189. My colleague Constance Irvine, who had moved into the office next door on Luna Base, had a theory about the documentation. She believed that most council administrators would read the executive summary, nod at the right places, file it in a system somewhere, and then only go looking for the specific sections when something broke and they needed to know why. Constance had spent 20 years watching how large bureaucracies handled paperwork, and she was rarely wrong about these things. Owen Calloway, who was sitting across from me eating a sandwich and reviewing the latest withdrawal status updates, looked up when I read him Sorvan's message. 18 months, he said, as if answering a question I had not asked aloud. That is how long I estimate before the Keth relay situation becomes something they cannot dismiss as background noise. 12, I said. The packet loss rate will compound. Once it crosses the 2% threshold, it will start affecting real-time coordination for 3 of the shipping lanes in the outer Cygnus arm. Those shipping lanes carry food supplies for the Theravan homeworld. Owen put down his sandwich. "Oh," he said quietly. "We documented it," I said. Section 7, subsection D, paragraph 3, the maintenance schedule, the recommended contractor specifications, the contact protocols. Everything they need to address it is in the document. But they have to read the document first. Yes, I said. They do. There was a particular quality to that silence. Owen and I had worked together long enough that our silences had flavors, and this one tasted like the specific feeling of watching someone walk toward a puddle you could see, and they could not, and knowing that warning them would require explaining things they had decided they already understood. I turned back to my screen. On it was a spreadsheet that had become, over the past 3 months, something close to an obsession. It was a list of every human-maintained or human-originated system in the Council's infrastructure, sorted by how quickly each one would show signs of strain without continued human involvement. The relay network was in column 1, fast deterioration. Owen had flagged it in red. The Galactic Standard Trade Arbitration Framework was in column 2, medium deterioration. The framework itself would not break, because it was a legal document, not a technical system, and legal documents do not require maintenance. But the humans who had spent decades interpreting it, who knew its history and its edge cases, and the 17 amendments that had been added over the years, and why each one mattered, those humans were gone. And when complex trade disputes arose, as they always did, the delegates who tried to apply the framework without that institutional knowledge were going to find themselves reading words that said the right things, but not understanding why they said them. The framework had been drafted by a man named Kofi Asante, a lawyer from Accra who had died 12 years ago and left behind 2,000 pages of commentary notes that existed in a personal archive that was now sitting in a storage unit in London, kept by his daughter Clara, who had no idea they were relevant to anything. I had Clara's contact information. It was in the documentation. Appendix C, page 387. Column 3 on my spreadsheet was medical research. This one kept me up at night more than the others, and I was not a person who was easily kept up at night. 60 years of human involvement in the Council's xenobiological research programs had produced a library of data that was now technically accessible to all member species, but practically readable only by researchers who understood the human methodologies used to collect and categorize it. Without human collaborators to translate and contextualize, that library was going to become increasingly opaque. Not immediately, but over years, as the researchers who had worked alongside humans retired, and the next generation tried to use a resource they had inherited, but never been taught to navigate. There was a particular dataset on adaptive immune responses in silicon-based biological forms that had been built over 20 years by a research team at the University of Cape Town. The lead researcher, a woman named Dr. Adaeze Okonkwo, had moved back to Earth after the expulsion vote. Her departure had also meant the departure of the only person who knew that the data in rows 40,000 through 67,000 of the main dataset had been collected using a slightly different calibration protocol and needed a correction factor applied before being used in comparative studies. That correction factor was documented in a footnote 847 of the supplementary materials, which were in an appendix of a sub-report that was linked from section 31 of the main handover document. Everything was there, every piece of it. Sorvan sent another message that afternoon. The council convened a working group on the relay issue. They are calling it a technical anomaly. They assigned 4 engineers. I wrote back, "Are any of them familiar with the Keth network architecture?" The reply came quickly. "They are reviewing the documentation now." I looked at Owen. "They are reading the document." "Section 7? He asked. "We will find out," I said. 3 days later, Sorvan sent a longer message. "This is the first time I have written to you, feeling genuinely worried." The engineering team found Section 7. They also found Sections 8, 9, 10, and the appendices. They have been in an emergency meeting for 6 hours. I am told the working group chair said a word in her own language that does not translate well, but apparently means something like "the floor is not where we thought it was." I read that message twice. Then I read it a third time. Owen leaned over. "What does it say?" I handed him the tablet. He read it, and then sat very still for a moment. "The floor is not where we thought it was," he said softly, as if testing how the words felt. "That is an interesting phrase." "It is an accurate phrase," I said. What the working group had discovered, when they started reading, was not just the relay network maintenance schedule. It was the shape of human involvement in council infrastructure, which was not, as most delegates had assumed, the involvement of a junior member species doing useful but secondary work that could be absorbed and redistributed without too much disruption. It was the shape of 60 years of human beings showing up every day and doing things that needed doing, without making a great deal of noise about it, in systems that other species used constantly, without knowing they had been built and maintained by hands from a small blue planet that the galaxy had mostly considered a curiosity. The engineering team had started with Section 7. By the time Sorvan sent that message, they had reached Section 22. They had 45 more sections to go, plus the appendices. I thought about what the working group chair must have felt, sitting in that meeting room, turning pages. I tried to put myself in her position. It would have been a little like discovering, in the middle of rearranging your house, that several of the walls you had been planning to repaint were actually structural, and that the person who had known which ones was no longer returning your calls. Not because they were angry, not because they were being difficult, just because you had told them to leave, and they had left, and they had been extremely professional about the whole thing. My comm unit showed a new message from Constance Irvine. Her message said, "Keth relay situation is escalating. I am tracking packet loss at 1.4% and rising. We will hit the 2% threshold in approximately 11 weeks by my calculations. The working group has recommended temporary rerouting through the Mavic relay cluster, but they do not know yet that the Mavic relay cluster uses a synchronization protocol that was written by a human contractor in 2278. I stared at that last sentence for a long moment. Then I sent a message back. "Is it in the documentation?" Her reply, "Yes. Section 14, subsection B. But the synchronization protocol itself is proprietary human contractor work." The contractor was Nathan Webb, formerly of Webb Systems Solutions, now retired. The company dissolved when Webb retired last year. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Owen." "I heard," he said. He was already pulling up something on his tablet. "Nathan Webb. I am checking his address. He is in the documentation too, I said. I remember adding him. Appendix F. Found him, Owen said. He is in Cornwall, growing vegetables, has been since he retired. There was a quality to that moment that is difficult to describe. It was not funny, exactly. It was something more like the feeling you get when you realize that a story you thought was about one thing is actually about something much larger, and the larger thing has been there all along, and you just had not been looking at it from the right angle. Nathan Webb was growing vegetables in Cornwall. His entire career, 30 years of specialized work building the synchronization protocols that kept several major relay clusters in the galaxy running, was documented in Section 14, subsection B, of a 412-page handover document that was currently sitting in the inbox of an engineering working group that had been reviewing it for less than a week. And somewhere in the outer Cygnus arm, a series of relay nodes was quietly dropping packets at a rate that was going to start mattering in 11 weeks. I opened a new message to Sorvan. I want to ask you something, I wrote, and I want you to be honest with me. Always, came the reply. In that chamber, when the vote happened, did anyone ask what we had been doing here for 60 years? Not in general terms, specifically. Did anyone present an actual accounting of our roles in council infrastructure? When it came, it was 3 sentences. There was a summary document prepared by the Council Research Office. It was 4 pages long. It described human contributions as secondary technical support in several coalition programs. Secondary technical support. 4 pages. I looked at my spreadsheet, at the columns and the color codes and the 412 pages of careful, thorough, completely honest documentation that described what secondary technical support actually looked like when you wrote it all down. I thought about Zarek, folded arms and clicking mandibles, satisfied and safe in the certainty that the galaxy had just made a smart decision. I thought about Nathan Webb in Cornwall, growing vegetables, probably not thinking about relay protocols at all. I thought about 11 weeks. Then I turned to Owen, and I said, put together a briefing document, 1 page, clean and simple. Summarize the 10 most time-sensitive items from the full withdrawal report. Send it to Sorvan, with a note that they are welcome to share it with whoever might find it useful. 1 page, Owen said. There are 47 time-sensitive items. The top 10, I said. The ones with the shortest deterioration timelines. Keep it readable. No jargon. Plain language. He started typing. I watched him work for a moment, then turned back to my window. Luna Base did not have city lights the way the Council City did. What it had was the slow curve of the Earth, turning in the dark, blue and white and patient, the way it had always been. 60 years. We had been in the coalition for 60 years. We had arrived young and fast, and full of questions that made older species nervous. We had asked those questions anyway. We had fixed things that were broken, and built things that were needed, and done the work that needed doing, not because anyone asked us to, but because we had looked at things, and seen what was missing, and reached out our hands. And then they had asked us to leave, politely, officially, by vote. And we had left, politely, officially, by paperwork. And now, 11 weeks stood between the Keth Relay Network and the 2% threshold. Owen finished the 1-page summary and sent it. I read it before he did. It was clear and accurate, and completely without emotion. The top 10 items, timelines, the relevant sections of the full documentation, 1 clean paragraph each. At the bottom, Owen had written a single line that I had not asked for, but that I decided to leave in. If you have questions about any of these items, we are still reachable at the addresses listed in Appendix A of the full withdrawal report. Still reachable. Not please call us, or we are available to help, or we told you so. Just still reachable. That, I thought, was exactly right. I picked up my coffee. The Earth turned slowly in the window. Sorvan's reply to the briefing document came 4 hours later, and it was the shortest message I had ever received from them in 20 years of friendship. They are reading it now. All of them. The room has gone very quiet. I took a long sip of coffee and did not say anything at all. Dr. Miriam Volkov had a habit of making lists, not on tablets or screens or any of the elegant devices that filled most workplaces, on paper, yellow legal pads, the old-fashioned kind, the kind that had been available in Earth stationery shops for over a century, and showed no signs of going anywhere. She kept stacks of them in her office at Luna Base, and when she was working through a problem, she would pull a fresh pad from the stack and start writing. Long columns of items in small, precise handwriting, until the problem had a shape she could see. She had gone through 11 legal pads since the Withdrawal Commission began its work. I had given her the title of Systems Architect for the Commission, which meant that her job was to map everything. Every human-built, human-maintained, human-contributed to piece of infrastructure in the Council's portfolio. Not just the technical systems, everything. Legal frameworks, research databases, medical protocols, early warning networks, cultural translation programs, shipping route optimization models. Everything that bore a human fingerprint, however faint. She had gone through 11 pads, and the document she was building from them was currently at 412 pages, and she had not yet finished part 3 of 6. I sat across from her in her office on a Wednesday afternoon, watching her write. She was 44 years old, with the particular kind of calm that belongs to people who have spent their careers doing work that most people cannot see. She had been a systems analyst before joining the diplomatic corps, which meant she had spent a decade cataloging the invisible things that held large systems together. She was very good at it. "I found something new today," she said, without looking up from her pad. "What kind of something?" "The Outer Reaches Early Warning Network," she said, "the one that monitors the Vork Passage." I had been expecting this. The Vork Passage was on my own list, flagged in a particular shade of red that I had started thinking of privately as the "it is worse than you realized" color. "Tell me," I said. She looked up then. Her expression was the one she wore when she had found something that surprised even her, which was not easy to do. The network has been running continuously since 2241. It has never been upgraded. It has never been replaced. It runs on predictive modeling software that was written for a doctoral dissertation at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology by a graduate student named Dr. Priya Chandrasekaran, I said. Miriam blinked. "You knew." "I knew she existed," I said. "I did not know the full picture until now." "What is the full picture?" Miriam set down her pen. She turned the yellow pad toward me. On it was a diagram, hand-drawn in the way Miriam always drew her diagrams, clean and precise and entirely self-explanatory. At the center was a box labeled Vork Passage Early Warning System. Around it, a series of connected boxes. Each one contained a name or a function. At the top, primary modeling software. Original author, Dr. P. Chandrasekaran. Dissertation, 2241, MIT. Below that, maintenance and calibration. Responsibility assigned to human technical staff. Council Station Vork 7. Contract lapsed, not renewed. Below that, escalation protocols. Anomaly flagging routed to human terminal. Council Station Vork 7. Terminal decommissioned. Below that, in slightly larger letters, current status. System running. Automated. No human oversight since withdrawal. 14 flagged anomalies in past 30 days. None escalated. Escalation route terminated. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Miriam. 14 anomalies, I said. In 30 days, she confirmed. The system is working. It is detecting things correctly. The problem is that it flags them, and then sends the flag to a terminal that no longer exists, and then the flag disappears into nothing, and then the system goes back to watching. And the anomalies? I do not know, she said quietly. That is the honest answer. Most of them are probably minor. Spatial density fluctuations, micro-variations in the passage's gravitational field. That is normal. The passage is not a stable environment. That is why it needs monitoring. But some of them might not be minor. Some of them might not be minor, she agreed. I cannot tell from the data I have access to, because assessing the anomaly reports requires understanding the modeling software well enough to interpret the severity ratings. And the only person who fully understood the modeling software was Dr. Chandrasekaran's doctoral advisor. Who was? Miriam turned another page of her pad. Professor Arthur Baines, University of Edinburgh. He retired in 2289. He is currently, she consulted her notes, living in Edinburgh. He keeps a small garden and occasionally gives lectures at the university on invitation. I sat back in my chair. Professor Arthur Baines. Living in Edinburgh. Keeping a garden. Is he in the documentation? I asked. Appendix G, page 401, Miriam said. Contact information, academic credentials, summary of his role in the original system design. All there. Of course it was. Everything was in the documentation. Every name, every role, every contact detail. Miriam had made sure of that. It was, in its own way, a remarkable act of generosity, that document. A complete and honest map of every human contribution to a coalition that had just decided it did not want human contributions anymore, left there, patient and detailed, for whoever needed it. I want to add a section to the document, Miriam said. She was looking at her legal pad again. I want to add a section specifically for the Vork passage, separate from the main early warning network entry. Its own section, with its own timeline, and its own risk assessment. How bad is the risk assessment? She was quiet for a moment. In 11 years of working together, I had learned that when Miriam went quiet for longer than 3 seconds before answering a question about risk, the answer was going to be sobering. The Vork passage is a corridor between the Cygnus arm and the outer reaches, she said carefully. 41% of the Council's long-range shipping passes through it. The passage is stable under normal conditions. Under abnormal conditions, it can become extremely unstable. The last time the passage experienced a major disruption event was in 2198, before first contact with Earth. The Council's own historical records describe it as the worst navigational disaster in recorded galactic history. How many ships were lost? Hundreds, she said. And the passage was dark for 6 years, meaning no transit at all. 6 years of the long-range shipping network for 41 civilizations, essentially being cut in half. I looked at the diagram on her legal pad, the box at the top. Primary modeling software. Original author, Dr. P. Chandrasekaran. And right now, I said, the only thing standing between the passage and a repeat of 2198 is a piece of software written for a doctoral dissertation in 2241, running without maintenance, with 14 unread anomaly flags, and no human eyes on it. Correct, Miriam said. Write the section, I said. Make it very clear. Plain language. No jargon. If someone reads only that section and nothing else, they should understand exactly what the risk is, and exactly what they need to do. She nodded and picked up her pen. I stood up and walked to her window. Luna Base had a view of the surface, gray and still and ancient, the way the moon had always looked. In the distance, the curve of the Earth. In a room 4 levels below us, Owen was updating the withdrawal timeline. In a room down the hall, Constance Irvine was reviewing the defense protocol handovers for the 43rd time, because Constance did not believe in doing things 39 times when 43 felt more thorough. I thought about Nathan Webb in Cornwall, and Professor Baines in Edinburgh, and Dr. Chandrasekaran on Luna Base, and all the other human beings who had been, quietly, the thing that held a particular piece of the galaxy together, and who were now growing vegetables and tending gardens, and consulting occasionally for private firms, when the money seemed interesting. I thought about the 14 anomaly flags sitting unread in a system that sent its alerts to a terminal that no longer existed. Miriam, I said. Yes? Add a note at the end of the Vork passage section. Just one line. What line? This section has been flagged as highest priority. Please review immediately. She looked up. That is more direct than the rest of the document. Yes, I said, it is. She wrote the line. Her handwriting was small and precise, and completely clear. I hoped someone would read it soon. I hoped they would understand what it meant. I hoped they would pick up the phone and call Professor Baines in Edinburgh, who would almost certainly answer, because Arthur Baines had spent 50 years in academia and had never in his life turned away a student who genuinely needed to learn something. I left Miriam's office and walked back to my own. On my desk was a message from Sorvan, time-stamped 4 hours earlier, which I had not yet opened. I opened it now. The working group presented their findings to the full council this morning. The session went longer than scheduled. I was not in the room, but I was told that at approximately the 3rd hour, the delegate from the Sovereign Brood asked whether the document the engineers were referencing was the same document that was delivered as part of the human withdrawal. The council secretary confirmed it was. The Sovereign Brood delegate said nothing else for the remainder of the session. I read that last part twice. The Sovereign Brood delegate, Zarek, said nothing else for the remainder of the session. I thought about Zarek in that chamber 3 months ago. Mandibles clicking, forearms folded in satisfaction, the sound of 700 delegates applauding, and now sitting in a session that was going long, surrounded by engineers talking about relay networks and synchronization protocols, and 412-page documents, saying nothing for the remainder. It was not satisfaction I felt. I want to be clear about that. It was not the pleasure of being right, or the sharp enjoyment of watching someone realize they had made a mistake. I had never been that kind of person, and 11 years in diplomacy had only made me less so. What I felt was something quieter, something more like the feeling you get when a very complicated story finally shows its shape, when you can see the whole arc of it, when you understand that the events unfolding are not the result of anyone's plan or scheme, but simply the natural consequence of things that were always true, expressing themselves in the only way they could. We had been essential. We had been dismissed. We had left. And now the galaxy was learning, page by page and section by section, and 14 unread anomaly flags at a time, what essential had actually meant. I sat down at my desk and opened a new document. I typed at the top, Supplementary Report, Vork Passage Early Warning System. Then I copied Miriam's risk assessment, word for word. Then I added the contact information for Professor Baines. Then I added Dr. Chandrasekharan's last known address, which was 4 buildings away from my own office on Luna Base. Then I sent it directly to Sorvan, marked urgent, with a note that said only, "Please share this with whoever reviews infrastructure risk on the council. The timeline on this one is not comfortable." Then I sat back and looked at the Earth in my window and thought about 14 flags and how long it might take someone to read the right section of the right document. The Earth turned slowly, patient as it had always been, old and blue and full of human beings who had learned, over a very long time, that the quiet work is often the most important work, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. His name was Sarek, and he had never in his life been afraid in a council chamber before the night of the emergency session. He had been aide to 3 different council delegates in his 22 years of service. He had sat through budget disputes that lasted 6 days. He had sat through the border renegotiations of 2289, which most political analysts described as the most tedious proceedings in coalition history, and which Sarek privately agreed with, though he would never have said so aloud. He had a talent for stillness, for patience, for the particular kind of professional invisibility that good aides cultivate, the ability to be present without being noticed, to absorb everything that happened in a room without reacting to any of it. He was reacting now. He could feel it. A small, persistent tension in his chest that had no name in his own language, and that he had learned, from years of working alongside humans, to recognize as dread. The emergency session had been called with 12 hours' notice. That alone was unusual. Emergency sessions in the Galactic Council were rare, and when they happened, the normal procedure allowed 48 hours for delegates to prepare. 12 hours meant someone at the very top of the council structure had decided that 48 hours was a luxury they could not afford. Sarek had arrived early and taken his seat in the aides gallery, the long curved row of seats above the main floor, where the staff and observers sat. Below him, the chamber was filling with delegates who all shared the same expression he had never seen on them before collectively, the expression of people who had been given information they had not expected and were still in the process of adjusting to its weight. He had read the briefing materials. He had read all of them, including the full version of the withdrawal documentation that had been finally distributed to all council delegates the previous week, 14 weeks after it had been delivered. 14 weeks in someone's inbox. 1 page of executive summary read, 412 pages filed and not opened, until 3 engineers on a working group had started reading Section 7 and had not stopped. Sarek had read the document cover to cover. He was one of perhaps 30 people in the entire council structure who had done so. He had read it in his apartment, over 2 nights, with a cup of tea that he had forgotten to drink. By the time he reached Section 31, he had put down the cup entirely and simply sat, reading, for 4 more hours. By the time he reached Appendix G, he had a feeling he could only describe as the ground shifting, not literally, metaphorically. the sense that the floor of what you thought you knew had just been revealed to be suspended over something much deeper than you had imagined. The chamber was full now. He counted delegates from 37 of the 41 member species. The 4 absent were all outer region civilizations whose communication with the core had already been experiencing disruptions. Disruptions related, the working group engineers had confirmed, to relay network degradation in 3 separate corridors. 3 of the corridors listed in Section 7, subsections C, D, and F. The council chair, a broad-shouldered being from the Theravan Free States named Vessel Prime Hoth, took the podium. Hoth was known for brevity, for cutting through complexity and reaching the core of things with minimum words. It was one of the reasons they had risen to chair. Tonight, Hoth said 6 words before stopping. "We have a situation of significant." Then Hoth stopped, seemed to recalibrate, then continued. "The working group on relay network maintenance has completed its preliminary assessment. I have asked Engineer Lead Torva to present the summary." Engineer Lead Torva was a small, precise being from the Keth Meridian. Sarek had met Torva once at a reception and had been impressed by her clarity. She was precise in the way that people who work with systems are precise, which is to say she was exact, because in her world, imprecision had consequences. She was precise tonight, but she also looked, for the first time in Sarek's experience of her, afraid. "The relay network degradation in sectors 7 through 19 is confirmed," she said. "Current packet loss rates range from 1.4% in the Keth Meridian corridor to 2.8% in the outer Cygnus shipping lanes. At current rates of deterioration, full communication blackout in 3 of these corridors is projected within 4 to 6 months. A sound went through the chamber. Not words. A sound. The specific frequency of several hundred beings processing bad news simultaneously. "The primary cause," Torva continued, "is the lapse in maintenance coverage of the human relay contractor network. Detailed maintenance specifications, contractor contact information, and transition protocols were provided in the human withdrawal documentation, sections 7 through 11. Our assessment is that this documentation contains everything required to begin remediation. However, several key technical specifications reference proprietary systems and methodologies developed by human contractors, some of whom are no longer professionally active." "Define not professionally active," said a delegate from the Sovereign Brood. "Not Zarek, a different one, younger, whose name Sarek did not know." "Retired," Torva said. "In 3 cases, the relevant specialists are retired private citizens, currently living on Earth or affiliated human habitation." "Can we contact them?" "Their contact information is provided in Appendix F and Appendix G of the withdrawal documentation." "Then we contact them," the young Sovereign Brood delegate said, with the confident tone of someone who has just identified a simple solution. Torva paused before responding, which in Sarek's experience meant the solution was not as simple as it appeared. "We can make contact," she said. "Whether they are willing or available to consult is a separate question. They are private citizens. They are under no obligation to respond." The chamber went very quiet. "They are former council affiliates," the delegate said. "They are former council affiliates who were asked to leave," Torva said, with a precision that was almost gentle, but not quite. "The council voted to expel humanity from the coalition. That vote carried with it the formal termination of all human service contracts and affiliations. The individuals in question departed entirely in compliance with that vote." More quiet. A longer quiet. Then Hoth said, "Continue." Torva took a breath. "The relay network issue, while serious, is not the most urgent matter before us today." She touched a control panel. A diagram appeared on the main display. Sarek recognized it. He had seen it in the document. Section 38. The Vork Passage. "The Vork Passage Early Warning System," Torva said, "is currently operating in an automated state, without human oversight. It has been in this state since the withdrawal. In the past 30 days, it has flagged 22 anomalous readings." "22," said the Mavic delegate Sorvan, from the second row. Her voice was very controlled. "The briefing we received said 14. "The number increased in the past 8 days," Torva said. "I am giving you the current figure. 22 anomalous readings. The escalation protocols for these readings route to a human monitoring terminal at Council Station Vork 7. That terminal was decommissioned as part of the human withdrawal. The flags are going nowhere. We have 22 unreviewed anomaly reports sitting in a queue that no one is reading. Sarek watched the chamber. He watched 200 delegates from 37 civilizations process what Torva had just said. He watched Zarek of the Sovereign Brood, sitting in the front row with 3 of their advisors. In 22 years of watching Zarek in council sessions, Sarek had never seen Zarek go still. They were always moving, adjusting, signaling to advisors, making the small, constant gestures of a being who was always calculating. Tonight Zarek was completely still. The modeling software that interprets these anomaly readings, Torva continued, was developed by a human researcher in 2241. It has not been updated since. The original developer is retired. The only individual who fully understood the system architecture was her academic advisor, a human named Professor Arthur Baines, currently residing in Edinburgh. On Earth, someone said from the back of the chamber. On Earth, Torva confirmed. Silence again. A different kind of silence from the working group meeting. That had been the silence of a small group of technical people, realizing a technical problem was larger than they had thought. This was the silence of 700 political beings realizing that a decision they had made with complete confidence was revealing consequences they had not imagined. Sarek had been a diplomat's aide for 22 years. He had a well-trained sense for when a room had reached a turning point, the exact moment when the weight of a situation shifted from manageable to something else. He was feeling that moment now. What is your assessment, Hoth said slowly, of the anomalies? What are they? Torva's pause this time was longer. We cannot fully assess them without interpreting the modeling software's output. We have engineers reviewing the software code, but it is complex, and the comments are written in human technical notation that our engineers are working to parse. We should have preliminary interpretation in approximately 3 weeks. 3 weeks, the Myvik delegate Sorvan said. Yes. And if the anomalies are not minor, if some of them represent, Sorvan stopped herself, chose her next words carefully. If some of them represent significant events in the passage. Then we will know 3 weeks from now, Torva said, and we will respond to whatever the passage looks like at that point. Rather than to whatever it looked like 3 weeks ago, Sorvan said. Yes. The Myvik delegate was quiet for a moment, then she said, very precisely, I would like the record to show that I voted against the expulsion. The record already shows it, Hoth said, equally precisely. Sarek looked down at his tablet. He had taken notes throughout Torva's presentation, force of professional habit. Now he looked at what he had written, and then he put down the stylus because his hand was not entirely steady. On the screen, the diagram of the Vork passage filled the main display, a long corridor, narrow, threading between 2 arms of the galaxy, with 41% of long-range shipping routes running through it. At one edge of the diagram, a small pulsing icon that Torva's team had added. It represented the 22 anomaly flags, pulsing slowly, quietly, waiting. A delegate near the back of the chamber raised a limb. Is there any possibility of contacting the humans, of asking them to, on a temporary basis, resume some form of monitoring role, for the passage specifically? Torva looked at the delegate. That would be a diplomatic question, not a technical one. Hath looked at the delegate. Ambassador-class communication with Earth, or with the Human Withdrawal Commission, would require a formal council resolution. Then let us pass one, the delegate said. More quiet. Then Zarek moved. The first movement Sarek had seen from them in 40 minutes. Zarek turned slowly to the delegate in the back. Their 4 arms were no longer folded in satisfaction. They were simply resting. Their mandibles were not clicking. What would the communication say? Zarek asked. Their voice was entirely neutral. Not hostile, not apologetic. Neutral, in the way of a being who is calculating very carefully and has not yet reached a conclusion. It would say, the delegate replied, equally carefully, that we have a situation in the Vork passage that requires expertise we do not currently possess, and that we are requesting assistance from the Human Withdrawal Commission. And if they decline, Zarek said, then, we will have our engineers' 3-week assessment, the delegate said, and we will respond to whatever the passage looks like at that point. They were using Torva's phrase. Sorvan's phrase. The phrase that carried in it the specific discomfort of looking at a clock and knowing the time was not your friend. Sirek watched Zarek consider. He had watched Zarek consider many things over many years. He had watched Zarek calculate advantage and weigh risk, and move political pieces with the patience of someone who had been doing it for generations. He had watched Zarek build the majority that expelled humanity with the same quiet, methodical strategy. He watched Zarek think for a long time. And then, very quietly, Zarek said, "Draft the communication." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then the room began to move again. Delegates turning to their aides, aides opening devices, the machinery of bureaucracy engaging around a new direction. Sirek looked at his own tablet. He found Yael's contact information, which he had kept in his personal files for 20 years, since they had been junior staffers together, trying to navigate a galaxy that neither of them had fully understood yet. He wrote her a message. It was short, because it did not need to be long. Yael, the chamber is drafting a communication requesting your assistance, specifically the Vork passage. I thought you should know before the official message arrives. He hesitated before adding the last part. Then he added it. I am sorry it took this long. He sent it. On the main display, the diagram of the Vork passage still glowed, with its 22 small pulsing flags. Waiting. Patient. The way the truth always waits. The message from the council arrived on a Thursday morning, standard Earth time, and I read it twice before I said anything to anyone. It was formal. It used the official language that council communications always used. All the careful diplomatic phrasing that existed to communicate things without quite saying them directly. But underneath the phrasing, stripped of the cushioning, it said this: "We have a problem in the Vork passage, and we do not know how to solve it without you." I set the message on my desk and looked at it for a while. Then I went and made coffee. By the time I came back, Owen had already seen the notification and was standing in my doorway. "It arrived," he said. "It arrived," I agreed. "What are you going to do?" I sat down. I looked at the message again. Outside my window, the Earth was in its particular early morning angle, the one where the Terminator line, the boundary between day and night, caught the light in a way that made it visible from this distance. A slow, precise line dividing darkness from illumination, moving constantly, always moving, the Earth always turning. "I am going to call Admiral Daejung Park," I said. Owen blinked. "The Fleet Admiral." "He has the nearest human diplomatic vessel in range," I said. "And he has the tactical clearance to operate in that sector without needing new authorizations, because that sector was in our jurisdiction until 14 weeks ago, and the access protocols have not been updated yet." Owen was quiet for a moment. "You kept your access credentials," he said. It was not a question. "I kept mine," I said. "Constance kept hers. Park has kept his." The withdrawal documentation specified that access credentials would remain valid for 1 standard year, for the purpose of coordinating handover activities. We are in month 4. "That is still within the window," Owen said carefully. "Yes," I said. "It is." I picked up the comm unit and dialed Park's direct channel. He answered after 2 rings, which told me he had already seen the council message. His voice was calm and even and measured. Park was 61 years old, a man who had spent 4 decades in space and had the particular quality of stillness that comes from a long time in environments where panic is the most dangerous response available. I had worked with him on 3 separate crisis situations over the years, and there was no one else I would rather have in range of a Vork-class anomaly scenario. "Ambassador," he said. "Admiral," I said. "You have seen the council's message." 20 minutes ago," he said. "I have also seen the anomaly report that Miriam Volkov forwarded to the Sorvan channel. 22 flags." 22, I confirmed. "We need eyes on the passage. Real eyes, not automated. And we need someone who can read the modeling software output without a 3-week learning curve." "Dr. Chandrasekharan is on Luna Base," Park said. 4 buildings from my office," I agreed. "And Professor Baines?" "I have his number," I said. "I have had it since we added him to Appendix G." "Then we have what we need," Park said. "What we do not have yet is authorization to operate in Council space. The Council has sent a formal communication requesting assistance. That constitutes an invitation." "From the Council's diplomatic office," Park said. Not from their defense council. I need a military clearance to bring a vessel into the Vork corridor. Get me an hour, I said. He was quiet. For exactly the length of time it takes a careful person to think through a complicated situation. 1 hour, he said. I will have the alderman on approach vector, holding position at the boundary of former human territorial space. Thank you, Daejung. Yael, he said, and there was something in his voice that was not quite humor, but was adjacent to it. When we go in there, and we solve whatever is happening in that passage, we are not going to let them use it to undo what the document established. Everything we do there gets documented. Every action, every communication, every decision, clean records. Already being arranged, I said. Owen will be keeping the log. Park made a sound of approval. 1 hour, he said, and ended the call. I looked at Owen. He was already pulling on his jacket. I will contact Constance, he said. She will need to handle the military clearance angle. Tell her to go straight to Hath, I said. Not through the normal channels, direct to the chair. We need the clearance before Park reaches the boundary. Owen left at a near run. I picked up my comm unit again and dialed a number I had been holding in my personal files for 4 months. It rang 3 times. Then a warm, alert voice answered, a woman who sounded entirely awake for 7 in the morning, which told me she had also seen the message. Ambassador Ose Mensa, said Dr. Priya Chandrasekaran. I wondered when this call would come. Good morning, Dr. Chandrasekaran, I said. I am very sorry to ask this of you. Do not be sorry, she said crisply. I have been watching the anomaly feed from my personal connection for the past 6 days. I still have read access, because no one changed the credentials. 22 flags, and 3 of them are patterns I recognize. How bad? A brief pause. 2 of them are routine. Density fluctuations. Normal for the passage this time of cycle. And the third? I need to look at it with Professor Baines, she said. He will understand the mathematical model better than I do at this point. It has been a while, but from what I can see without his interpretation, she paused again. It is not routine. I am calling him next. Good, she said. Tell him I said hello, and tell him to bring his notes from 2253. He will know which ones. I ended the call and dialed Edinburgh. It was a different time of day there. The light would be different, the quality of a Scottish morning, gray or gold depending on the season, and I found myself imagining the phone ringing in a small house near a garden, a man who had spent 50 years in academic work looking at his phone and seeing a number he recognized. He answered on the first ring. I have been expecting you, said Professor Arthur Baines. His voice was dry and precise and entirely unsurprised. I read Appendix G. You read Appendix G, I said. I was curious about where my contact information had ended up, he said. So I found a copy of the full document. I read all of it. Took me 4 days. A brief pause. Extraordinary document. Whoever wrote it was extremely thorough. Dr. Miriam Volkov, I said. Our systems architect. Please tell her I was impressed, he said. Now you are calling about the Vork passage. Yes. Priya's system has been flagging things. 22 anomalies in the past month. She says 3 of them are patterns you would recognize. She needs your 2253 notes. I heard him exhale, a long, slow breath. Then a sound that might have been him pushing back a chair. I will need 40 minutes to find them. They are in my study. Not digitized. Actual paper. Priya kept all her records better than I did. She always did. A short silence. Can you arrange a secure connection to the system? I will need live access to the modeling output. Constance Irvine will arrange it within the hour, I said. Admiral Park is moving a vessel to the passage. Good, Baines said simply. Good. The passage should have a human ship nearby. It always should have had one. He paused again. Ambassador. Yes? When this is over, he said, you should tell the Council that monitoring the Vork passage is not a secondary technical support function. It never was. Whoever wrote that 4-page summary in 2289 did not understand what they were summarizing. It is in the document, I said. Section 38. Very clearly stated. Good, he said again. I will find my 2253 notes. Give me 40 minutes. He ended the call. I set down the comm unit. The door opened and Constance Irvine came in. She was a woman of 50, precise and efficient, with the kind of energy that fills a room without being loud about it. She set a tablet on my desk. Hath's office responded in 9 minutes, she said. That is the fastest the chair's office has ever responded to anything I have sent them. I looked at the screen. Temporary operational authorization, granted to human diplomatic personnel for purpose of Vork passage assessment and stabilization. Duration, 30 days. Clearance level, full access. Full access, I said. They gave us everything, Constance said. She paused. They must be very worried. 22 anomaly flags and a 3-week engineering learning curve will do that, I said. Send the authorization to Park. He can move on this now. She was already typing. I picked up my coffee, which was cold, and drank it cold, which seemed fitting for the morning. Owen came back through the door. Park is moving. He estimates the alderman will reach the passage threshold in 6 hours. Baines needs 40 minutes for his notes, I said. Chandrasekharan is already reading the flag data. Get her a direct, secure connection to the system and set up a conference channel with Baines the moment he is ready. Owen was writing. And you? I am going to send a reply to the Council's communication, I said. Formal acknowledgement. We are responding to the request for assistance. We are proceeding under the temporary authorization. We will provide full documentation of all actions taken. All actions documented, Owen repeated. Everyone, I said. Clean records. Always clean records. He nodded and left. I opened the reply channel and began to compose the message. It was short and correct and professional. It did not say we told you so. It did not say you should have read Section 38. It did not say you voted us out and 4 months later you are calling us back because the passage is lighting up with anomaly flags and the only person who can read them is in Edinburgh, finding notes he wrote in 2253. It said, the Human Withdrawal Commission acknowledges the Council's communication. We are responding. We have authorized personnel moving to the Vork Passage sector. We will provide full situation reports at regular intervals. It said, we will help. Because that was always what it said. Even when it was hard. Even when it cost something. Even when the people asking had stood in a chamber and clapped while a gavel came down on us. We would help anyway. Because that is not something you do because you are asked. It is something you do because you are the kind of people who do it. I sent the message. Outside, the earth kept turning. In 6 hours, a human ship would be in range of the Vork Passage, and a retired software developer and an elderly academic would be on a conference call together, reading anomaly flags, and the galaxy would quietly, without announcement, be a little safer than it had been an hour before. That was enough. That had always been enough. That was who we were. The Vork Passage, when you see it for the first time through a ship's forward display, looks nothing like you expect. I had seen photographs, data visualizations, the kind of color-enhanced imagery that scientists produce when they want a spatial feature to communicate its own scale. None of it had prepared me for seeing it real, on the main screen of the Alderman, 4 hours into our approach, as the passage began to fill the display from edge to edge. It was a corridor, in the most literal sense. A long, narrow region of space where the gravitational balance between two galactic arms created something that behaved, for ships traveling through it, like a road. The walls were not visible, exactly. They were implied by the way the stars behind them distorted, by the subtle shift in the density readings, by the feeling, which I did not entirely believe in, but had anyway, that you were inside something, rather than simply near it. Admiral Park had been right next to me when the passage came into full view. He had seen it before, 3 times. He looked at it the same way he had looked at it the other 3 times, which was to say with the particular kind of respect that experienced people give to things that can end you if you handle them wrong. We are receiving the live data from the modeling system, said the Alderman's communications officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Kara Nolan, speaking from the station to my left. Dr. Chandrasekharan and Professor Baines are both on the secure channel. They are ready. Put them through, Park said. The conference channel opened with the small sound of 2 separate connections joining. Dr. Chandrasekharan's voice was first, crisp and direct. Admiral, Ambassador, the 3 priority flags I mentioned. I am sending them to your display now. The first 2 are density variations, cycle normal, no action required. The third one needs Baines. Professor Baines's voice was different. older, slower, with the particular cadence of someone who is reading while talking. I have the flag on my screen, and I have my 2253 notes. The year we identified what we called Pattern 7, a specific configuration of gravitational microvariations along the passage's northern wall. What is Pattern 7? Park asked. It is a precursor, Baines said, not to an immediate event, to a condition that, if it continues to develop, leads to passage wall instability within a specific time frame. In 2253, we identified it during a monitoring review and recommended a navigational advisory. The passage was flagged as high caution for 4 months. Then the pattern resolved, and the advisory was lifted. And this flag is showing the same pattern? I asked. Not quite the same, Baines said carefully. Similar, but the measurements are larger. The 2253 event was a minor instance. This one is reading larger. I need time to calculate the specific parameters. Park looked at me. I looked at him. We had been in enough situations together that the look was enough. He turned back to his operations officer. What is the current shipping traffic in the passage? The operations officer checked his display. 14 vessels currently in transit. 3 approaching from the outer reaches end. 2 queued at the Cygnus Arm entrance awaiting clearance. 19 ships, from 11 different civilizations, carrying cargo, personnel, supplies. How long for Baines to complete the calculation? I asked the channel. An hour, Baines said, without looking up from what he was reading. Maybe less, if Priya helps me with the integration step. I am already on it, Dr. Chandrasekaran said. In the background I could hear her typing. Park leaned toward me slightly. His voice was very low. If his calculation indicates imminent instability, we need to halt transit in the passage. I know, I said, which is going to require council authorization, because we do not have the clearance to issue navigational advisories for passages outside human territorial space. We have temporary operational authorization. For assessment and stabilization, I said, not for traffic control. Park was quiet for a moment. Get Hath on the line, he said. Already sending the request, Owen said from behind us. I had not heard him move to the communications station, but Owen had a talent for being where he needed to be. He looked up. Hath's office responded. The chair is available immediately. Immediately. The same word Constance had used about the 9-minute response time. The council was moving fast now. When you spend 14 weeks not reading something and then you read it, and it tells you the floor is not where you thought it was, you start moving fast. Hath's voice came over the channel. Ambassador Ose Mensah, what is your status? We are in position at the Vork Passage threshold, I said. Our specialists are analyzing the anomaly data. We have one flag that requires a precautionary response. We are requesting temporary authority to issue a navigational advisory for the passage if the analysis confirms instability. A pause. Short, but real. Granted, Hath said. If your specialists recommend it, issue the advisory. I will have the Traffic Coordination Office standing by to implement. Thank you, Chair Hath. Ambassador, Hath said, and stopped. Then continued. Thank you for responding. It was not the full thing that needed to be said. It was a first approximation of it. I understood that. These things take time to say correctly, and the correct time for them is not while you are in the middle of an unfolding situation. We are here to help, I said, and ended that part of the call. On the main display, the Vork Passage glowed. 14 ships inside it, 3 approaching, 2 waiting at the entrance. On the conference channel, Baines and Chandrasekaran were quiet, working, the kind of quiet that belongs to people doing mathematics. I had been around scientists enough to recognize it. It was not the quiet of uncertainty. It was the quiet of concentration. 19 minutes passed. Park did not move from his position. Nolan monitored the data feeds. Owen kept the log, each entry precise and time-stamped. The alderman held its position. Then Chandrasekaran's voice, Arthur. I see it, Baines said. Yes. Is that what I think it is? A pause. Larger than 2253. Significantly larger. But the same pattern. I calculate the critical threshold at. A pause, while he clearly checked a number. 41 hours. If the development continues at the current rate, the northern wall will begin destabilization in 41 hours. 41 hours, Park repeated. Give or take 3, Baines said. 3 hours on either side as a precautionary margin. Park looked at me. 38 hours minimum. We need the passage clear of all traffic in 38 hours. 14 ships inside, I said. 3 approaching. 2 at the entrance. The 14 inside will need to move, Park said. The 3 approaching can be diverted. The 2 at the entrance stay grounded. Then we need the Council's Traffic Coordination Office to issue that instruction, I said. I looked at Owen. Do you have the channel to Hath's office still open? Open and ready, Owen said. Tell them we are issuing the advisory, I said. Passage closure recommended in 38 hours. All traffic inside needs to accelerate to exit velocity and clear before that window. 3 approaching vessels to divert, 2 waiting vessels to hold. Owen was already speaking into his comm. On the main display, the passage glowed, its subtle distortions patient and beautiful, and indifferent to the small urgency of the beings who moved through it. Baines, I said. What happens after the threshold point, if the destabilization begins? If we let it go? He thought for a moment. The northern wall will compress. It will not collapse entirely, not the way it did in 2198. Not immediately. But transit will be unsafe, for weeks, possibly months, depending on how far the compression progresses. I have a stabilization calculation. Tell me. There are 3 relay stations along the passage's northern edge, he said. They were designed as navigation aids. But they also emit a low-frequency gravitational modulation signal as a byproduct. If you coordinate those 3 stations to pulse in a specific sequence, the modulation can counteract the compression. Think of it as applying a gentle counterpressure from multiple points simultaneously. I ran this in 2253, but we never needed to implement it. The pattern resolved on its own. What is the sequence? Sending it to your display now, he said. But Admiral Park, someone will need to physically access the relay station control systems to implement it. Remote access is not possible. The stations are hardwired for manual operation. Park looked at his operations team. Can the alderman reach all 3 stations? In sequence, Nolan said. It will take time. 8 hours minimum for all 3. We have a 38-hour window, I said. We have a window, Park agreed. He turned to his operations officer. Set course for Relay Station 1. Maximum safe approach speed. Setting course, the operations officer said. The alderman began to move. On the conference channel, Baines was talking through the technical details with Chandrasekaran, the specific control sequences, the timing windows, the particular care needed with the 3rd station because its modulation calibration was slightly different from the other 2. He knew this because it was in his notes from 2253. He had written it all down then, carefully, because that was what he did. In Edinburgh, in notes written in 2253, on paper. I thought about that for a moment. About the chain of things that connected a doctoral dissertation in 2241 to a retired professor's paper notes to a small ship threading through the Vork Passage on a morning that, to the 41 civilizations who used this corridor, was just another morning. They did not know. The ships queued at the Cygnus entrance, now being told to hold, did not know why. The 14 ships inside, now being asked to accelerate to exit velocity, did not know what they were exiting ahead of. They would know later. It would be in the records. Owen was making sure of that. Every communication, every calculation, every decision. The alderman reached Relay Station 1 in 2 hours and 15 minutes. The station was a small structure, more functional than beautiful. The kind of thing that gets built because it is needed, and not because anyone is particularly proud of it. Park sent a team over in a shuttle. They were inside for 40 minutes. When they came back out, the station had been programmed with the first element of Baines's sequence. We reached Relay Station 2, 4 hours later. The team went in again. 40 minutes again. Station 3 was the farthest from our entry point, deep along the northern edge of the passage, in the region where the distortion effects were strongest. The shuttle ride was longer, and the communications had more interference. Baines talked the team through the calibration process live, step by step, reading from his paper notes, answering their questions with the patient precision of a man who had spent 50 years teaching. When the team came back from Station 3, I was standing at the main display. On the display, the passage looked the same as it always had, beautiful and indifferent, but the 3 relay stations were now pulsing in sequence, a slow, coordinated rhythm, that the display's instruments could measure, even if human eyes could not see it. Chandrasekharan's voice came over the channel. I am seeing movement in the northern wall readings. Good movement or bad movement? Park asked. Give me 3 minutes, she said. 3 minutes of everyone not speaking. 3 minutes of the display showing data streams and instrument readings, and the passage sitting large and indifferent in front of the ship. Good movement, Chandrasekharan said. The compression pattern is reversing. Slowly, but it is reversing. The stations are working. I let out a breath I had not entirely known I was holding. On the conference channel, Baines made a sound. It was small and quiet, and entirely satisfied. The sound of a person who has just confirmed that something they understood 70 years ago is still correct. Priya, he said. Arthur, she said. We should publish this, he said. The full protocol, not just the 2253 observation, but this complete implementation, so that the next time, anyone who needs this can find it without calling retired professors at 7 in the morning. Agreed, she said. I will write it up. You review. Give me 2 weeks, he said. I am a slow reviewer. You have always been a slow reviewer, she said. 3 weeks. Done, he said. The channel had a particular quality now, the quality of a finished thing, of work completed correctly, of a problem that had been solved before it became a disaster. Park looked at me. We should send a full report to Hath. Owen is drafting it, I said, without looking behind me, because I did not need to look behind me to know that Owen was drafting it. And the passage can reopen for transit once the last of the 14 ships has cleared, and Chandrasekharan confirms the compression has fully stabilized, I said. She is estimating 4 to 6 hours. Park nodded. He looked at the passage on the display for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, to no one in particular, it would have gone bad. Yes, I said. Not immediately, but in 41 hours. Yes, I said again. He was quiet for a moment more. And we were here because we kept the credentials current. We were here because we documented everything, I said. The credentials were part of the documentation. He accepted that. We stood together at the display, watching the readings, watching the slow, beautiful reversal of a compression pattern that 41 civilizations had not known was coming, and which had been stopped by paper notes from 2253, and a dissertation from 2241, and a ship that had never really believed it was not needed here. 6 hours later, the passage was stable. The clearance for transit was issued. The first ship through was a Theravan cargo vessel, carrying food supplies, moving through the passage with the complete, ordinary confidence of something that does not know how close things had come to being very different. It passed through, and then another, and then another. The passage was open. The stars continued in their courses. The galaxy did not know what had almost happened, and did not need to, because it had not happened, because we had been here, because we had never really left. Surek's message arrived as the last ship cleared the corridor. It was short. He simply said, I am watching the transit feed. The passage is open. The delegate from the Mavic Collective just said that if there is any justice in the galaxy, someone will remember this moment correctly. I wrote back, someone will. Owen is keeping the log. The formal session of the Galactic Council that reconvened 6 weeks after the Vork Passage event was different from every other session I had attended in 11 years of diplomatic service. It was not different because of the decor or the room arrangement or the time of day. Those things were the same. It was different in the way a room feels when the people in it know something they did not know the last time they gathered, when a conversation that everyone understood on one level is now being had on a different level, one that cannot be undone or forgotten. I sat in the same chair, the same angle. The crystal podium caught the light the same way. This time no one clapped. Council Chair Hoth stood at the podium for a full 30 seconds before speaking. I had counted Hoth's silences over the years, and 30 seconds was the longest I had seen. It was the silence of a person choosing words with great care, because the words mattered more than usual. This session has been called to address the formal relationship between the Galactic Council and humanity, Hoth said. Specifically, the Council's vote of Cycle 2301, expelling humanity from the Coalition, and the subsequent events that the Council has collectively determined require acknowledgement and response. Hoth paused. Then, Very precisely. We will begin with the record correction. The record correction was a formal council procedure for cases in which the official minutes of a session were found to be materially incomplete or inaccurate. It was rarely invoked. It required a 2/3 majority to approve. The council had approved it for this session with 689 votes, 2 more than had voted for the expulsion. The council secretary, speaking in its flat translated voice, read the correction. The original session record had described humanity's contributions to the coalition as secondary technical support in several coalition programs. The correction stated that this description was found to be inaccurate following comprehensive review. The corrected record described human contributions as foundational infrastructure support across 47 separate coalition systems and programs, comprising primary operational responsibility in 73% of the coalition's relay network maintenance, 61% of xenobiological research database development, and the primary design, construction, or maintenance of 19 critical systems, including, but not limited to, the Vork Passage Early Warning Network. The secretary read for 12 minutes. I sat quietly. Owen, seated behind me in the aides row, did not move. When the secretary finished, Hoth returned to the podium. The council recognizes, Hoth said, that the vote of Cycle 2301 was taken without full information. The summary document provided to delegates at that time did not accurately represent the scope of human involvement in coalition infrastructure. The council accepts responsibility for this deficiency. A pause. Then, additionally, the council recognizes that the response of the Human Withdrawal Commission to the expulsion vote was conducted with a level of professionalism, transparency, and completeness that reflects well on humanity and reflects poorly on the circumstances that necessitated it. Another pause. Longer. The council formally and officially acknowledges that it made an error. 11 times in the resolution text, Owen had told me. 11 uses of the word error. The resolution was 847 words long. Owen had read it twice and told me the relevant parts. I had read it once and decided that was enough. Sorvan of the Mavic Collective was seated in the second row, in the same seat she had occupied for the expulsion vote. She had been one of 13. When the vote for the error acknowledgement was held, she voted first. The display showed her vote before anyone else's. A single green indicator appearing on the board, like someone lighting a candle in a dark room, before the rest of the lights came on. Zarek was in the front row. Zarek had signed the resolution as a co-signatory. I had been told this by 3 different people before I arrived at the session, and each of them had said it with the same slightly disbelieving quality, as if they were not entirely sure it was real until they said it aloud. I understood that. Some things need to be said aloud more than once before they settle into being true. Hath looked at me. Ambassador Osei Mensa, the council has a proposal to present. I nodded. The council proposes the creation of an infrastructure commission, a permanent standing body with the specific mandate of auditing, documenting, and protecting the coalition's critical infrastructure, with permanent human representation at the senior level. A body that did not exist before, I said. A body that should have existed before, Hoth said. The council's assessment is that the absence of such a body was itself a governance failure. The withdrawal audit, as it has come to be called, makes this very clear. The withdrawal audit. That was what they were calling Miriam's document now. 412 pages of thorough, careful, honest work, sitting in someone's inbox for 14 weeks, before circumstances made it impossible to ignore any longer. Dr. Miriam Volkov, I said, would be an appropriate candidate for the senior human role on the Infrastructure Commission, if she is willing. Hoth inclined their head. We would welcome Dr. Volkov. The council would also welcome any other specialists she recommends. I will ask her, I said. But Chair Hoth, before I give you any formal answer about the proposal, I want to be direct with you about something. Hath waited. We are not interested in returning to the relationship that existed before the expulsion vote, I said. Not because we are angry, because that relationship was not working. We were present, we were contributing, we were essential. And none of that was visible, not because we hid it, but because no one looked, because no one asked, because no one thought to wonder what would happen if we left. The chamber was completely quiet. What we want, I continued, is not tolerance. We tried tolerance for 60 years. What we want is partnership. The kind where both sides understand what the other brings to the table. The kind where the contributions of every member species are documented and acknowledged and protected, not because we are afraid of losing them, but because we understand that they matter. That is what the Infrastructure Commission could be, if it is built correctly. Tell us how to build it correctly, Hoth said. It was, I thought, the most important question they had ever asked me. Maybe the most important question anyone in that chamber had ever asked of a human being. Start with the audit, I said. Not just ours. Audit everyone, every member species, every contribution to coalition infrastructure. Make it thorough, make it honest, and make it public, so that no delegate in this chamber can vote to dismiss a species without knowing first what that species has been doing. Hath considered this. That will take time. Yes, I said. It will. It will require resources. Yes. Some species may find the results uncomfortable. Some will, I said. That is rather the point. Hath turned to the chamber. The council will take this under advisement. The Infrastructure Commission proposal remains on the table. They looked at me again. Ambassador, the council thanks you for your response to the Vork Passage situation. The preliminary report from Admiral Park and your commission has been reviewed. The detail and clarity of that report, they paused, reflects the same quality as the original withdrawal documentation. Owen keeps good logs, I said. A small sound went through the chamber. Not quite laughter, but something in the vicinity of it. I looked at the chamber then, all 700 faces, or things that worked like faces, and I tried to see them, the way I had been unable to see them in those first years, when they had all looked alien, and unknowable, and impossible to read. I could read most of them now. Not all, but most. 22 years of looking at something strange until it becomes familiar, until the strangeness becomes detail, until the detail becomes knowledge. That was what we did. We looked at things until we understood them. We stayed until we knew. We built and documented and maintained and showed up and showed up and showed up, until the work became so ordinary that no one noticed it was being done. And when they told us to leave, we left properly. And when they called us back, we came properly. And we documented all of it. I stood up. The Withdrawal Commission will provide a formal response to the Infrastructure Commission proposal within 30 days, I said. In the meantime, we remain available for consultation on any time-sensitive items in the withdrawal documentation. There are still several systems in the transition period that would benefit from continuity of human involvement until replacement protocols can be fully implemented. We will be in contact, Hath said. I picked up my pen, clicked it once. Sorvan, in the second row, heard it and looked at me. I caught the look. I held it for a moment. Then I nodded, very slightly. She nodded back. I left the chamber. Owen fell into step beside me in the corridor. The same corridor I had walked 6 months ago, past the same photographs of Earth, oceans and mountains and cities and faces. They did not seem small or far away tonight. They seemed exactly the right size for what they were. 30 days, Owen said, for the formal response. 25, I said. We will be ready in 25, but it does not hurt to promise 30. Miriam is going to say yes to the Infrastructure Commission, he said. She already knows about the proposal. She sent me a message this morning that said, and I am quoting directly, "The only thing better than documenting what went wrong is being in a position to make sure it does not go wrong again." I smiled. It was a genuine smile. Not the diplomatic kind, not the professional kind, the real kind. That sounds like Miriam. It does, Owen agreed. She also said she is going to need at least 14 legal pads. Order her 40, I said. She will need them. We reached the end of the corridor. The lift doors opened. We stepped in. Yael, Owen said as the doors closed. Yes? How do you feel? It was the kind of question he only asked sometimes, in the quiet moments between things, and I had learned over the years to answer it honestly rather than diplomatically. Careful, I said. We have done something right today, but there is a lot of work ahead of it. The audit, the commission, the system still in transition. This is not a resolution. This is a beginning. But a good beginning, he said. I thought about Miriam's legal pads, about Baines reviewing papers on a timeline of 3 weeks, because he had always been a slow reviewer. About Chandrasekharan writing up a protocol that had never been written up before, so that the next person would not need to call Edinburgh at 7 in the morning. A very good beginning, I said. The lift hummed. The doors opened. We walked out into the night, which in the council city was lit by 1,000 colors from 1,000 sources, warm and noisy, and full of the ordinary business of civilizations that were, mostly, trying to get along. We stepped out into it and walked on. The Infrastructure Commission opened its first full session 14 months after the Vork Passage event, on a morning when the council city was having the particular kind of weather that happens when 3 different atmospheric systems argue with each other, and the result is that the sky cannot quite decide what it wants to do. It rained lightly, then it stopped. Then a cold wind came through. Then it was briefly sunny, all in the space of an hour. I stood at the window of the new commission offices and watched it happen, and found it entirely appropriate. Miriam was running the session. She had accepted the position of co-senior lead on the Infrastructure Commission with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything, and she had spent the past 14 months building the team, designing the audit protocols, and going through what she estimated was her 28th legal pad. She had asked for 40. She was on her 28th. The Commission's first audit had covered human contributions. That was the starting point, because it was the one where all the data already existed, where the withdrawal documentation had done the heavy lifting, where the work of documenting was already mostly complete. Miriam had expanded and refined it, added verification layers, built a format that could be applied to any species. The second audit, the one whose preliminary results were being presented today, covered the Mavic Collective's contributions to coalition infrastructure. The Mavic Collective had been in the coalition for 200 years. They had been quiet, steady members, the kind that did not generate headlines or dramatic votes, the kind whose contribution was often invisible, precisely because it was continuous. The audit found, in its preliminary results, that the collective was the primary maintainer of a navigation data-sharing network that 89% of coalition vessels used for route planning. Nobody had known this. It had never been in a summary document. It had never been formally acknowledged. Sorvan was in the room when the preliminary results were presented. She sat in the third row of the Commission's main meeting space, not behind the big delegate table, but in the observer section, because her role here was not as a council delegate, but as something she had asked to be, which was a witness. She had explained this to me over a meal 2 weeks earlier, in a small restaurant near the Commission offices that served food from 6 different worlds in proximity, that would have seemed impossible 30 years ago, but had become, in the way of things, ordinary. I want to be in the room when the audits are presented, she had said. Not to vote or comment or advise, to witness, because someone should be in the room who understands what it means when a thing that was invisible becomes visible. You could do more than witness, I had said. The Commission could use your experience. Later, she had said, first I witness. So she sat in the third row, and she watched Miriam present the preliminary results of the Mavic audit. And when the result about the navigation network appeared on the display, I saw Sorvan's expression change. It was subtle, the kind of change that only someone who had been watching her face for 20 years would notice. But it changed. The session continued through the afternoon. Miriam presented the audit framework, the methodology, the timeline for rolling the protocol out to other member species. She was precise and unhurried, and answered every question with the completeness of someone who had thought about the questions before they were asked. Owen sat beside me, keeping the log. He was always keeping the log. After the main presentations, there was a break, and then a smaller meeting, just the Commission leadership and the relevant council contacts, in a side room with a long table and windows that looked out over the city. I was there. Miriam was there. Sorvan had been invited and had come. Hath joined the call by remote link, as the chair often did for working meetings, where their presence was advisory rather than decisive. On the screen, Hath's expression was the one I had come to recognize as their thinking face, the one that meant they were assembling pieces into a picture. The first year's audit targets, I said, once the technical briefings were complete. Mavic is being presented today. The next priorities. Theravan Free States, Miriam said. They operate the primary food distribution logistics network for the inner cluster. Based on preliminary research, they are the sole managers of it. No redundancy documentation exists. After that, I said. The Keth Meridian. Their contributions to the Deep Space Sensing Network have been partially documented by the Relay Working Group, but the full picture has not been mapped. And we should prioritize the early warning systems across the board, Constance Irvine said from the far end of the table. Constance had joined the commission in a defense and security capacity, which meant she spent her days worrying about the things that happened when infrastructure failed at the worst possible time. She was very good at this, because she had a particular talent for imagining everything that could go wrong, and then documenting it so that other people did not have to imagine it alone. All early warning systems, Miriam agreed. The Vork Passage event made the case for that more clearly than any briefing document could have. Hath's voice came through the screen. The Council has approved a dedicated funding allocation for the Commission's second year, larger than the first. There was very little debate. 6 months ago, that statement would have surprised me, Sorvin said. 6 months ago, the Vork Passage had 22 unread flags, Hoth said, with the dry precision of someone who has learned to say uncomfortable things cleanly. The meeting continued. Practical things were decided. Timelines were set. Resources were allocated. Contacts were identified. The ordinary machinery of getting things done, turning slowly, and then faster as it warmed up. When the formal part ended, and people were beginning to gather their things, Sorvin came to stand beside me at the window. Below us, the city moved in its ordinary way, the constant complex motion of millions of beings and thousands of purposes. Ambassador, she said. She still called me ambassador in formal settings. It was a choice, a deliberate one, and I respected it. Sorvin, I said. I want to ask you something that I did not ask 6 months ago, because 6 months ago I was not sure you would answer it. Ask, I said. Did you know, she said, when you left, did you know it would happen the way it happened? The relay network, the passage, all of it? I thought about this carefully. It deserved a careful answer. I knew it was possible, I said. I knew that the footprint was large enough that its absence would be felt. I knew the timeline on several of the most critical systems. But knowing that something is possible is not the same as knowing it will happen. I hoped it would not. I hoped they would read the document, all of it, and act on it before things became critical. But you also prepared for the case where they did not. I kept the credentials current, I said. Park kept his vessel in range. Baines kept his notes. Chandrasekharan kept her access. We did not plan the Vork Passage event, but when it happened, we were positioned to respond to it. That is different from planning it. It is a very human distinction, Sorvin said. It is, I agreed. We are very good at being positioned to respond. We have had a lot of practice. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the city below. If the passage had not happened, she said, if the deterioration had been slow enough that nothing became critical, would you have waited indefinitely? No, I said. The Commission was already planning to reach out directly to the Council's infrastructure office, informally, through the contacts we still had. Not to ask to come back, just to make sure the document was being acted on. We were going to wait 6 months and then start making those contacts. You had a timeline. We always have a timeline, I said. Humans are very uncomfortable with undefined waiting periods. Sorvin made a sound that was the Mavic version of a small laugh. That is something I have always found characteristic. Is it a good characteristic or a bad one? Today, she said, it is a very good one. The city moved below us. In a room 2 doors down, Miriam was already starting a new legal pad, her small, precise handwriting beginning the notes for the Theravan logistics audit. In an office on the floor below, Owen was updating the commission log with the session's decisions and timelines, and the names of the people who had been in the room. Always documenting, always building the record that would outlast the moment and give the next generation something solid to stand on. Professor Baines had sent a note that morning. He and Chandrasekharan had completed the Vork Passage protocol paper. It was being submitted to the Council's scientific archive with a new addendum, a section detailing the 2301 implementation, the specific sequence used, the timing of the stabilization, a complete, verified, usable protocol that anyone with the right access could find and apply. He had also sent a short personal note that he had appended to the official version. It said only, "In case this is ever needed again, which I hope it will not be, but which history suggests it might, Here is everything you need to know. That was it. No dramatic phrasing. No heroics. Just the information. Clearly organized. Complete. Waiting for whoever needed it. That was the whole thing, really. When you stripped away all the politics, and the vote, and the expulsion, and the crisis, and the passage, and the formal sessions, and the apologies, that was the whole thing. Here is everything you need to know. Available. Patient. Waiting. I stayed at the window until the city below began to shift into its evening colors. The long, slow palette change that happened when the local star started its exit, and the atmospheric lights took over. It was beautiful in a way that I had spent years being too busy to notice. I noticed it now. Miriam put her head in the door. Yael, the second audit team has their preliminary scope ready. They want to walk through it tonight if you have time. Give me 10 minutes, I said. She nodded and disappeared. I looked at the city one more moment. I thought about 11 years at a table, where we had tried to be useful. About 60 years of humans showing up in a galaxy that had not been sure what to do with us, and doing the work that needed doing. About a gavel coming down and 700 delegates applauding and walking out into a corridor past photographs of Earth and deciding, calmly and completely, to leave the right way. And then, when the call came, coming back the right way. Not because we were told to. Not because we had proved a point. Not because we had won or lost or been vindicated. Because there was work to do, and we could do it. And somewhere in a narrow corridor between two arms of the galaxy, 19 ships and their crews were moving through a passage that was stable, and they did not know why, and that was entirely fine. You do not do the necessary work for the credit. You do it because it is necessary. Because you are the kind of people who, when they look at something broken, reach out their hands. When they look at something missing, start building it. When they look at something dangerous, stay to address it. That is the human anomaly. That is what 700 delegates had not understood when they voted to call us a destabilizing cultural influence. That the instability they were seeing was not us trying to break things. It was us being unable to walk past a thing that needed fixing without stopping. We cannot help it. It is who we are. I turned from the window and went back to work. 10 years is a particular kind of distance. Close enough that the details are still sharp. Far enough that the shape of things becomes visible, the whole arc of it. The way a story looks when you can see both the beginning and where you are now, standing in the middle of something still unfolding. I am sitting at my desk on a Tuesday morning, which is the kind of ordinary detail that only feels worth mentioning, because there was a time when my Tuesdays were consumed by things that felt enormous, and now my Tuesdays are consumed by things that are enormous, but have become ordinary, which is how progress works when it is going well. Outside my window, the city is alive in the way it has been alive every morning for 10 years since we came back. The Infrastructure Commission offices are on the 14th floor of a building that the council allocated for us, and that we have slowly made ours, covered in the particular accumulation of a working place, boards covered in notes, shelves full of legal pads, a corner where someone has put a photograph of the Earth that has been there so long it has become part of the furniture. Owen is at his desk in the next room. I can hear him typing. He types the same way he always has, steady and even, like someone who understands that the rhythm of the work is as important as the content of it. He is 39 years old now, and he has been keeping logs for 10 years, and the logs are, in my opinion, among the most important documents in the Commission archive. Not because they contain dramatic revelations, because they contain everything, complete and honest and chronological, the whole record of what was done, and who did it, and when, and why. Miriam is in Edinburgh this week, visiting Professor Baines. They are preparing the 3rd edition of the Vork Passage Protocol, updated with data from 2 additional monitoring cycles. Baines is 91 now, still sharp, still precise, still a slow reviewer. He sent me a note last week that said the 3rd edition will be better than the 2nd, and the 2nd was better than the original dissertation, and the original dissertation was the foundation everything else stands on, which is the most he has ever said about his own work in all the years I have known him. Dr. Chandrasekaran gave a lecture to the full Council Infrastructure Commission last spring. She is 83, and she stood at a podium surrounded by beings from 41 civilizations, and she talked for 3 hours about the mathematics of predictive modeling in unstable spatial environments. She had no notes. She knew it by heart. At the end, during the discussion period, A young engineer from the Keth Meridian asked her a question about feedback loop calibration, and she answered it in a way that made 6 different people in the room visibly understand something they had not understood before. I was watching when it happened. That moment of understanding crossing a face, the small shift in expression, the settling of a previously unsettled thing. It is one of the best things to watch. It never gets old. Zarek of the Sovereign Brood retired from the council 2 years ago. Their retirement was handled in the traditional Sovereign Brood manner, which is a formal ceremony where the retiring delegate summarizes the work of their tenure and the lessons they carry from it. I was not present at the ceremony, but a transcript was made available, and I read it. The section about the expulsion vote was not long. 3 paragraphs, direct and honest in a way that I had not expected, and that made me think better of Zarek than I had in some time. The relevant part said, I was wrong about what humanity represented to the coalition. I was not wrong in the sense of misunderstanding the facts as they were presented to me. I was wrong in the more fundamental sense of not asking for the facts that were not being presented. A leader who does not ask what they are not being told is a leader who has decided that their current understanding is sufficient. Mine was not. 3 paragraphs. It took courage to write them, in the specific way that writing the truth takes courage when the truth does not reflect well on you. I kept those 3 paragraphs. They are in a folder in my desk, not as evidence of anything, just because they seem true, and true things are worth keeping. The Infrastructure Commission has now completed audits of 23 member species. The results have been, without exception, surprising to someone, not always in the way you might expect. Sometimes the surprise has been finding that a species thought to be peripheral to coalition operations was actually critical, in ways no one had mapped. Sometimes the surprise has been finding that a species thought to be essential had, over the years, been quietly supplanted by the infrastructure of other members, and the assumption of essentiality had been running on inertia rather than reality. Every audit becomes part of the public record. Every result is discussed in open session. Every member species now has a formal acknowledgement of their contributions in the Commission's permanent archive, updated annually. It is not a perfect system. No system is, but it is a system where the invisible things have a chance of being seen before they disappear, and that is something that did not exist before. Sorvan completed her year of witnessing and joined the Commission in an advisory capacity. She is good at it. She has a way of asking questions that makes people think they are reaching the answer themselves, which is the most useful kind of question to ask. We have lunch together once a month in the small restaurant that serves food from 6 worlds, and we argue about Commission protocol in a friendly way that has become its own kind of tradition. Clara Asante, the daughter of Kofi Asante who drafted the original trade arbitration framework, came to the Commission last year with 2,000 pages of her father's personal commentary notes. She had found them in a storage unit in London and had kept them for years, unsure whether they were relevant to anything, and then had read the Commission's annual report and found a reference to her father's work and contacted us. Owen spent a week scanning and cataloging the notes. They are now in the Commission archive, searchable, accessible, linked to every reference in the trade framework that they illuminate. In 3 separate arbitration cases in the past year, those notes were cited in the proceedings. Each time, the citations closed an argument that had been running in circles without them. Kofi Asante has been dead for 22 years. His words are still doing his work. That is, I think, the best kind of legacy. The kind that does not require the person to be present. The kind that is so clearly and practically useful that it simply continues on its own merits. Constance Irvine, who spent 2 years at the Commission and then took a position as the Council's first Director of Infrastructure Security, a job that had not existed before and that she had largely designed, sends me a report every month. The reports are thorough and somewhat alarming in the way that Constance's professional assessments always are, because Constance has a talent for identifying risk that is accurate and does not soften things for the sake of comfort. Last month's report noted that 3 systems in the outer reaches were showing early signs of the same kind of unattended deterioration that had characterized the relay network issue in 2301. The difference from 2301 is that this time the Commission had already flagged them, already identified the responsible parties, already begun the process of ensuring continuity of expertise. The report said, projected timeline to critical degradation, 47 months. Current intervention begun, 46 months ahead of threshold. 1 month to spare. Not because we were racing toward a cliff, because we were watching the road. I wrote her back. Good work. Keep the margin. She replied, always. My comm unit shows a message from a young diplomat named Aisha Korantema, who joined the human delegation 3 years ago, and who reminds me of Owen at 29 in the specific way that the most capable young people remind you of the most capable young people you have known before. She wants a meeting this afternoon to discuss a proposal she has drafted for extending the Commission's audit methodology to the treaty framework, not just the physical infrastructure, but the legal architecture of the coalition itself. She thinks there are provisions in several existing treaties that no one has reviewed in decades and that may have become, in her word, vestigial, technically present, but no longer reflecting the actual state of things. The word vestigial is doing a lot of work in that sentence. I appreciate it. I have scheduled her for 2 o'clock. I am genuinely curious to see what she has found. This is the thing about the work, the thing that is hardest to explain to someone who has not been inside it. It does not end. It does not reach a point of completion where you can stand back and say, there, that is done. We have finished the thing. The galaxy is always changing. The systems that support it are always shifting. New species join the coalition. Old ones evolve their roles. Technology changes. Demographics change. The corridor that was stable last year may be showing new patterns this year. The work of understanding it, mapping it, maintaining it, that is a continuous project, not a one-time achievement. And that is not a burden. That is the point of it. The Commission is not solving a problem. It is building a practice, a habit of looking, of asking, of refusing to assume that what is invisible is therefore unimportant. Every Tuesday morning I come to this desk, and I read the overnight reports from the monitoring teams and the audit teams and Constance's security group, and I find the 3 or 4 things that need my attention, and I give them my attention, and then at 2 o'clock, Aisha will come through the door with her proposal about vestigial treaty provisions, and I will listen to what she has found, and we will decide together what to do about it. And Owen will document it, all of it, clean and complete and time-stamped. Outside, the city is fully awake now. The sky has settled on overcast, which is not as beautiful as sun, but is honest, which is its own kind of beauty. Sorvan sent a message this morning, before the workday began. It was brief. It said only, the Commission's 5-year report is being cited in the academic curriculum at the Diplomatic Academy. They have made it required reading for 3rd-year students. I wrote back, which section? She replied, all of it, but especially the Vork passage chapter. The professor who teaches the course told me it is the best example she has found of what it looks like when essential work is invisible, and what happens when it is suddenly absent. I sat with that for a moment. Then I typed, tell her we are available for a guest lecture if she would like one. Sorvan's reply was immediate. She will say yes. She has been hoping you would offer. I set down my comm unit and looked at the Earth photograph on the wall across from my desk. Blue and patient and spinning, as it always was, as it had been spinning for 4.5 billion years, through everything that had happened to it, and around it, and despite it. We had been in the galaxy for 60 years before the expulsion. We had been back for 10. In those 10 years, the Commission had built an archive that did not exist before, a practice that did not exist before, a way of looking at things that was becoming, slowly and then more quickly, ordinary. The kind of ordinary that becomes infrastructure. The kind that people will one day not notice because it simply always works. I am content with that. Not because the story is over. It is not. Not because the work is done. It never will be. But because the kind of work we are doing, the specific kind, the quiet, careful, continuous kind, is the right work. The work that holds things up. The work that prevents the floor from not being where it seemed. At 5 minutes to 2, Aisha Korantema knocked on my office door. She is 26 years old, precise and curious, with a pad full of notes and a look in her eye that I have come to recognize as the look of someone who has found something that nobody else has noticed yet. Come in, I said. Tell me what you found. She sat down. She opened her pad, and we began. That is what we do, always. We begin. We arrive, we look, we ask the questions that need asking, we do the work that needs doing, and we document all of it, carefully and completely. so that whoever comes after us has something solid to stand on. Not because anyone will thank us, not because the stars will remember our names or the galaxy will carve our likenesses into anything, but because the thing that needed doing was there, in front of us, and we were the kind of people who could not look at it and walk away. We never have been. That is the anomaly. That is the whole beautiful, complicated, exhausting, wonderful truth of it. We cannot walk away from a thing that needs doing. So we don't.